we ended up with the Merkaba Mystery School ending up in 3 different areas of the world: Egypt and Peru, Yucatan, and Tibetan area, up in there. And at the Egyptian one was the male aspect of this grid that was going to be created around the world. And the people who started, or the primary person who started that particular school over there was Ra. Sometimes spelled R-A, sometimes R-E. And he was another one of the immortal beings who had found out about immortality during the time of Atlantis. This continued on, and to this day, archaeologists have, especially Egyptian archaeologists, have no explanation whatsoever. Just zero, zip. All they know is that's what happened. If you ask them how, they don't know. But what was going on, and the reason behind all of this, was this. It's very simple once you understand what was happening behind it. Underneath the Great Pyramid, in that little temple village city under there, was about 1,600 fully aware, self-aware beings who, which was part of only the Merkaba Mystery School branch in Egypt, became known as the Tot Brotherhood. It was Tot Brotherhood because Tot was one of Thoth's sons, his only son, actually. And Tot stayed with Ra. And it eventually became known as the Tot Brotherhood. Even today there's the Tot Brotherhood there, but it's the superficial ones who are the guys outside and they protect the temples. They're the protectors of the temples. But there's the hidden inner Tot Brotherhood, which are the immortal beings. And they, after the destruction, when the poles shifted and the whole thing collapsed in and we dropped in consciousness and we started eating food again and a lot of other things that we didn't do before. The minds were erased. There was nothing there. And so they had to sit for a very long time while we regenerated ourselves and recreated much of our patterns and started. It's like someone who has amnesia. You got to start learning how to read all over again and all these other things like that. So the mechanisms were fine. They just had been erased. So what the Tot Brotherhood was doing was they were sitting under there waiting until all of them until they saw that we had gotten to the right place and we were in the right place of the orbit and everything else. Like all those things were right. And then they sent either 1, 2, or 3 members of the Tot Brotherhood, which were immortal beings, out to either the person or the group, whichever it was that had reached the particular level that could accept what was being told. And they would come out looking like them and dressed like them, and would go out and just tell them, remind them of something they already knew. But of course it sounded brand new to them, but it wasn't really new to them. They had known this at one time before. And they told them, they gave them the language, they gave them the various things. They give them various aspects, and then go back under there and wait and let them absorb that. And then when they get to another level where they're ready, then another one would come out and give them another group of this. And so what would happen is you'd see these things going like this in evolution. It's like, like hydraulics, for example. They would just suddenly know everything about hydraulics. They'd know things about hydraulics that would take thousands of years to evolve through normal ways of thinking, and yet they'd know it all in 1 year. Where did it come from? How did they possibly know this stuff just like that? But they did. And that's what was hidden underneath this, is you had these 2 very intelligent races that were injecting the information directly back into these 2 cultures. So that within a very, very extremely short period of time, in one lifetime of one person, they went from 0 to 90 miles an hour. And they were full tilt on. There was a problem that began to develop, specifically in the Egyptian side. And it was not quite... It wasn't nearly... I don't even know if it was a problem on the Sumerian side for sure. but it definitely was one on the Egyptian side. The Egyptian culture began as two countries. It began as a polarized state, where you had Upper and Lower Egypt. Now, in their memories, they still had the memory of what it was like before the poles shifted, which everything was reversed around. The sun rose in the west and set in the east, and polarities were different and everything. And so the whole country, you really do, what you think and what you feel creates your reality more than you may know. And they created a world where Upper Egypt was to the south and Lower Egypt was to the north. And the Nile runs from the south to the north. It's the only river in the world that does. The major river that runs from south to north. All the rest of them go the other way. And even there, if you go to Dindara, which I'll show you a thing, which is the heart chakra in one of the temples in Egypt, there's a place up there where you'll see the astrological signs on the ceiling. They look just exactly like the ones you would recognize today, in precisely the same way and everything else, except that they're moving the other direction. The heavens are rotating in the opposite direction that we're used to seeing them move. That wasn't the problem, though. The problem is they started out in this polarized way, and the problem developed around religion, not around the understanding of language and the sciences and these kinds of things. And it was religion. It was the understanding of God that was the problem. Now, the religion of that time was the Osirian religion. And Osiris was not an Egyptian. He was an Atlantean. And he was the first person, according to Thoth, that graduated from the Nakal Mystery School out of Atlantis. The people that were in Lemuria were teaching how to be an immortal being, and here they are, eon after eon, sitting there teaching it, and they couldn't get anybody to do it. You know, I don't know why. They just couldn't get them to do it. And they finally got one person, and that one person's name was Osiris. And the second person and the third person was Isis and Horus. They were all, it was really kind of simultaneous. But Osiris was the one that made the direct attempt. And the story of Isis and Osiris is really the basis of Christianity. It's very, very similar in a lot of ways. Isis and Osiris were brother and sister. They were also married. And they also had another brother and sister, which is Seth and Nephis. So Isis and Nephis were sisters, and Seth and Osiris were brothers. And Seth and Nephis were also married together. And at one point, Seth killed Osiris. Now, you may take that as a negative act. I don't know if we can judge this or not, whether or not Seth was actually the bad guy in all of this. He may have been, it may have been that they something that was more or less agreed upon between the two of them. This is my feelings about this, because just the understanding of what was going on here. But that's my own feelings. But anyway, he killed Osiris and floated him. In the story has all been transposed over into Egyptian times. So he was put in this wooden casket and floated down the Nile. But of course, it wasn't really the Nile. And And then Seth and Nephis went and looked for him for a long time and finally found him and brought him back. And when he did, Seth then took the body and cut it into 14 pieces and distributed them all over the world so they would never find him again. And so then Isis and Nephis went around searching for these pieces to bring them back, and they found 13 of the 14 pieces. They found everything but the phallus, which was the 14th piece, which has to do with the creative flow. And so they went to that temple, one that we showed you. Remember that long one where I dropped down into and went and took pictures? They put together 13 of these pieces together and recreated his body. And then it was Thoth, Chikatet, who went in and recreated the phallus, gave him back his life force energy, and he then became an immortal person through this process. And the process was that he began in one state, the first state, and then he was killed and separated, cut up, and then his pieces were put back together and resurrected. He resurrected from there. And it was done also through Immaculate Conception, which is another element in all of this, which I'll talk about in a little bit later. It was done through the Holy Trinity. We'll have to discuss what that was all about at the right time. I'll come back to this story a little later at another time when we talk about Immaculate Conception. But anyway, the procedure that Osiris used to make the transformation from one level of consciousness to another was corresponded with the chromosome patterns that are in every cell of your body. And in those days of Atlantis, they didn't need to write these things down, like I described to you before about a memory. So that was understandable by other people without that having to be done. But when it got to Egypt, it had to be written down because writing had been introduced, which caused us to grow, as we'll talk about later, another part of a skull up here, and it changed our body height and changed our perception of the reality and a lot of things just by introducing writing. And let me see. Here it is. So in the Egyptian times, they had to put it into book form, and they put it into this book, which was called the 42 Books of Thoth. But there were 2 more books that were set aside. There were 42 plus 2 books, because they started with 42 plus 2 chromosomes, starting from the first level of consciousness, like the Aboriginals. And the chromosome levels, or the pathways, were called nephers, and they were represented by people with either human heads or animal heads, and they had various symbols over the top of their heads. This one was Ma'at, which meant truth. And each one, they all had their different meaning, and they represented movements in the Great Void, which we are about to talk about a little later. And so the study of this was important to the Egyptians. However, when they developed as 2 countries of Upper and Lower Egypt, they had 2 kings and 2 ways of looking at things. These 44 different nephers took on one image, 44 different images actually, in Lower Egypt, and 44 different images over here in Upper Egypt. And then, to complicate it more, the people began to think that each one of these nephers with a small g for God, they gave it a big old capital G, and started saying that Isis was God, or Sekhmet was God, or Anubis was God, etc. like this. And each little community started polarizing all the way down the whole thing. This is where your cults all began to take place in here. And this just kept getting worse and stronger and worse as time went by. And the Ascended Masters and the top brotherhood were sitting there going, we're going to do something about this. There's only one God, and they don't realize this. And they knew that the plans that was laid down at that time, if it was not changed, that by the time we got to here, we wouldn't possibly be able to make it through. And it has affected us strongly, even now. And so they decided that they would try to intervene directly again to make another change in this, to guide us toward one God, the understanding that there's only one. And they went to, and Thoth according to him, walked right into the room to greet Imhotep II, which probably just blew his mind. And because I'm sure that even he thought he was just that guy on the wall all the time. He wasn't really a real person. And convinced him that he should do something that no king would normally ever do. And that is that he would not allow his son to be king, but to interject someone else to be king. So he probably convinced him real well. I don't know what he did, but he got it. And so what was decided is that they needed to bring forth certain things, and the first step that they decided to do was that they were going to bring an actual Christ consciousness being in a real fourth dimensional Christ consciousness body and have that person walk on the earth. That person would be called the Pharaoh. And what Pharaoh means is that which we will become. That's what it means. And that is exactly what they were trying to do, was to give you the example of where our consciousness was leading to, that we were going to go through metamorphosis from this state to another one, and we would appear differently. We would still be somewhat human, but very, very different in a lot of many, many ways, physiologically as well as consciously, in lots of ways. And so they wanted to put it right into the Akashic record, the example, so that it would be there all the way down until this time now. That was real important to do. And then the next step after that was there was another step also agreed upon at that time, which I will explain in just a moment. So the first thing is they wanted to get this person walking out on the surface of the earth. Well, to create a Christ consciousness being, you can't use the chromosomes of an ordinary people. You have to have 46 plus 2 chromosomes. So you have to start with that level. And so who they chose was Taye and I. These people are very old. They're very old no matter how you want to look at it. They weren't kids. And they were asked to have babies. And so they had this baby. And the baby then was interjected into the lineage and became Imhotep III, or the last king of Egypt. And then when Imhotep III grew up and became an adult, he had a baby. And that baby's name, of course, was Imhotep IV, which we know more as Akhenaten. His name was Akhenaten. And he became the first pharaoh of Egypt and the first pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, which there was a dramatic change between the 17th and 18th dynasty. In the meantime, while Imhotep III was having this little baby of Imhotep IV, Taye and I had His names get confusing. Taye and I had another baby, and that baby's name was Nefertiti. And so Nefertiti and Akhenaten were indirectly brother and sister. And again, when we talk about Immaculate Conception, you'll see that there is this thing about brothers and sisters, and that's been going on all over the world for a long time. And I'm not trying to judge it or anything else. I'll just give you the information at the right time. You make up your own decisions about it. But there seems to be something around this. And so they had this other little baby, and eventually Nefertiti and Akhenaten grew up, and they got married, and they became the first pharaoh and queen of the 18th dynasty. Now, Akhenaten did not look anything, hardly at all, like a human being. For one thing, he was 14 and a half feet tall. Nefertiti was 10'6", I think it was, somewhere around in there. And they were, as you're going to see here in just a little bit, they were very unusual people. Before I get into that aspect of things, I want to talk about what's up on the screen here. This is Abu Simbel, which is at the base chakra at the end of the bottom of the Nile. Corresponds to the base chakra of the spine. You see these very, very large statues there. Here's some more, same place. They're standing here, which is a better one to see. You can see the heights of these people, and you see these very high ones. These beings here are about roughly 55 feet tall. We think that this is it. That our height and our place is kind of the standard of the universe. Kind of, But actually there are many, many different heights of consciousness or bodies out there, from little tiny ones to very big ones. And in human consciousness on Earth, there are actually 5 different heights of beings that have lived and do live on Earth at various times. And they correspond with 5 different consciousness levels that are possible, because when we reach the 5th one, the 55-foot high one, we leave totally this concept of reality. It's a stepping stone to somewhere else. And this is demonstrated in Egypt in the sense that every king that has ever lived in Egypt all had 5 names, representing these 5 different consciousness levels. And these 5 different heights of beings are, the first one is about 3.5 to 4.5 feet tall, could even be 5 feet tall. It's a range around in there, usually. And then the next, and that one has 42 plus 2 chromosomes. The next one is the one we're in, and we're about 5 feet to 7 feet tall. We all fall somewhere in there, usually, pretty much. There's exceptions. There's always exceptions. But, pretty much. And we have 44 plus 2 chromosomes. The next one goes up quite a bit. It goes 10 to 16 feet tall. And they have 46 plus 2, and that's where Christ consciousness first enters in. And then the one after that, which I know very little about, which is another stepping stone consciousness like this one, it's another disharmonic consciousness, is roughly 30-35 feet tall, and they are 48 plus 2 chromosomes. And the final one is between 50 and 60 feet tall, which averaging about 55 feet, and that one is 50 plus 2 chromosomes. Right now, we are on the 2nd level, and so all you're ever concerned with in consciousness is that which you just came from, the past, present, and future. The one you just came from, the one you're in now, and the one you're going to. It's like the leaf plants saying, I just grew 3 leaves, now I'm at 5, and I need to go to 8. And so we have three consciousness. We're concerned with the aboriginal, 42, we're concerned with ourselves, and the one where we're going to. And so these other 2, these really tall ones, we don't need. But the Egyptians left all the actual sizes of these beings sitting all over Egypt. And no one knows why they did this. They created actual rooms for these people to really, literally walk around in them, because they literally did walk around in them. And for example, you'll see a room here with like an 18-foot high ceilings inside of here. And then right next to it, you'll see a room with 8-foot ceilings. Right, just side by side. So you've got a room, and all the temples have these very, very high structures moving around, so that very big beings can walk through those things without being influenced by them, and having very special places for them to go to. Here you see an ordinary person here and a 55-foot tall one sitting beside each other here. This is the king, this is the queen, but what archaeologists say is, well, that's because the male's more important. That's why they did that. But I mean, it has nothing to do with that. They're talking about levels of awareness here. They're not talking about who's more important. And this, by the way, is this thing on the Eve theory, where they have traced, biologists have traced, using the DNA, the overlapping patterns of all the various races in the world, all the way back to a single person in this very specific valley that is talked about in the Sumerian records as where we all started. According to Melquisedek, it was 200,207 years ago, to be specifically, when that took place. And even the timing is extremely accurate. And this is Taye. That's what she looks like. That's a statue that was made of her when she was in Egypt. But she looks young like that all the time. She never ages at all. So she's an ancient person. So if she was walking down the street, you would just never, how are you going to know? You don't know. You never know. And this is Saqqara, which is where the Egyptian archaeologists say that it all began. They say that before Saqqara there was nothing, absolutely nothing. It all began here. And Saqqara is an incredible place. It's really big, and there's rooms that are 200 feet under the ground and all kinds of things. It's an immense complex. It stretches for miles around, actually. This being the primary center. This was the first pyramid built in Egypt, according to archaeologists. Of course, the Great Pyramid was already sitting there before that ever started. And but I tell you, this is not it, and eventually they will prove this. This is the writing that just came out of nowhere. This is a better one over here. It's very perfect, clean, straight to the point, clear writing that first came out at Saqqara, and then very soon got more and more complex and muddled and not as clear, and kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And by the time the Egyptian thing collapsed, it was degenerated greatly. This little thing here is a rod, which I talk about. It has a rod with a tuning fork on the bottom. It has a 45-degree angle at the top, which you can see that they would put back at this chakra, strike the rod, and they had this other thing that they could tune the rod with, and a frail that they could turn and tune the sound going down the spine just exactly, and get exactly the frequency moving through them to tune them perfectly, along with sexual energy that they were using. At the moment of orgasm, they would direct the flow in such a way that they could put themselves directly into a very specific universe. And it was a high degree of understanding that they would use Tantra. though it was only part of what they did. And these were the tools. They not only used this one, but they used this one and this one. This was the egg of metamorphosis. These are all talking about resurrection here. This is the key of life, the Ankh, which is the secret to how they directed the flow of energy so that they would become immortal. And I'll actually tell you exactly how to do that in here, though I'm not going to teach it, but I will tell you the key. You can get the rest of it from your higher aspect. And this I don't quite understand how they use that one there. This one here is an interesting symbol. That triangle with a triangle in the middle, that's the hieroglyphics for the star Sirius. Whenever you see that one, they're talking about Sirius. You see it down here again, over here.
Is the triangle at the bottom? The little one inside?
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it has a little triangle inside of it. What are you talking about?
Inside the pyramid, is that the little triangle?
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a triangle, and then there's a little one inside. Oh, is there a little one inside the little one?
No.
No.
From where it was.
No, it's just this one here. It's representing Sirius A and Sirius B.
But not the Sirius that are golden or Fibonacci.
This? Well, that's neither golden mean nor Fibonacci. And I can't remember all that. It has to do with the crown of Upper or Lower Egypt. I can't remember. But I don't remember what that is about. This is what's going to destroy that history that they're saying about. You see, the Egyptians tell you that it all started about 6,000 years ago, a little less than that, in Saqqara. And if you present them with information of something that's older than 6,000 years, they'll just walk away from you. They won't talk to you. Refuse to talk about it or anything. And the reason is because the Quran says that creation began 6,000 years ago. And so they can't contradict the Quran. And almost all the Egyptian archaeologists, all the archaeologists in the world are all Egyptian. There's only a few. And the ones that aren't, they're not going to get access to Egypt if they start saying things are older than that. I mean, you just can't buck it. It's just like you can't do it. And what they've done, there are pyramids that are much older than 6,000 years old. But they won't let you even get near them. In fact, they've placed military installations around all of them. These big high fences and machine guns and everything. They will not let you even get near them. And then they tell you all they are is just nothing. They're just mud masabas, is what they call them. Made out of adobe, and there's nothing there. Not even worth looking at. And you won't even find any photographs of them, hardly at all. You can't get anything on them. And any time you try to get any information on them, they're not important. It was before it all began. And so I wanted to say, well, let me just see one. No, can't see one. Well, let me just walk up near one. Oh, well, okay, maybe. We'll let you walk near one. They want me to give me $7,000 to just get near one. You know, this kind of stuff. No pictures, nothing like that. And I kept bribing people and everything else. I finally got them to take me to this one because this is the only one that isn't on a military installation. And the reason is because there's little villages that were all around it, and they couldn't do it. And so you've got to go through people's backyards to get to this thing. I mean, it's incredible. And I finally, after a week of talking to people and begging and paying people off, and I mean, I lost a lot of money on this one to get here. It's an expensive thing. But I finally got there, and they tell you that there's nothing to it. And the reason is because there's little villages that were all around it, and they couldn't do it. And so you've got to go through people's backyards to get to this thing. I mean, it's incredible. Instead of being just mud maswas, these are old, and they don't take care of them. They want them to fall down. You've got these huge, the whole things were covered with these huge granite blocks. I mean, it was real pyramids. And you look around, and for 10 miles around this complex are pyramids everywhere. Just totally a forgotten place. And there's a ramp that goes down this thing, just like in a big, huge ramp going several hundred feet down to the into the Nile. A pyramid is a water pump. I don't know if you know this. It's a pump that will pump huge amounts of water without any moving parts in it. They've been able to reproduce these in the United States. And this one's still functioning. It's 200 and something feet above the Nile, and the baby fills up with water. They've got to pump that out to get in there every time. They pump all the water out to go inside of it, and it'll fill right back up with water again. And the whole interior is nothing but geometrical images all over the walls. Well, as you're about to see, geometrical images is a higher level of writing than hieroglyphics. Much higher. And only they just say, oh, it's just geometrical images, they don't mean anything. I mean, they just really play it down. They don't want you to even say that it's anything. But while I was there had been a team of approximately 30 American linguistics experts who had finally got permission to get in there. And I happened to be on the airplane with one of them writing back. And he was so excited. They felt that they had finally cracked the code of language. They believed this pyramid held the key to all the languages of the world. And knowing what I know, especially with what you're about to see here real soon, they very well may be correct.
Where was that?
Huh?
Where?
It's the name of it, although I don't know how to write it in Arabic. It's called Lahirit. Yeah. It's about, I don't know, it's not even a village. It's just a bunch of houses. It probably does have some kind of name. It's about 30 miles north of Saqqara. And someday this place will, but if they tie this one down, this pyramid is about 500 or 600 years older than Saqqara. Well, if they establish that this was the beginning place, then you find that the two, that puts Egypt at exactly the same age as Samaria. These are some of the kinds of things that they found there, which are these little flower, these 6-petal little flower of light pattern things that came out of that era. These sharp pointed things. This is Osiris here with this green skin, and he's holding the tools of resurrection. You see the rod with a 45-degree little rod. There's a frail, the hook, and the little tuning fork down at the bottom down here. This is Anubis. He represents the star Sirius, and again, he is one of the Nephers. One of the plant, you'll understand here in a little bit, but he's one of the keys to how to move in the great void, to create immortality. Now this is Akhenaten and Nefertiti and one of their daughters. And it's not drawn to perfect scale. You'll see the perfect scale in just a moment. Akhenaten had a purpose. He had a few purposes to come out in the world, and one of them was to change the religions of all these cults that had happened all over there to a single religion so that they could know that there's only one God. And so when Akhenaten took power, and he took power under very extraordinary circumstances, there was actually 2 kings in Egypt and 2 cities in Egypt. They built him a brand new city called Tel El Amarna. And there's a stele there that is in the middle of the city. And if you took a satellite view of Egypt, it is in the precise, absolute, dead center of the country. They have no idea how they got so accurate. I mean, it's right down to it's perfect. And they marked the center, and they put the city right around that. And the city was made of only white stones. And And they waited until the city was built, and then when it was finally built, the Akhenaten and Nefertiti left Thebes and came over. And the country was actually ruled from 2 cities and 2 kings simultaneously for a while. That had never happened before. And then they finally let the transition go, because this was a real transition period to a new way of being. And they gave the image of the sun, the solar disk, as the image of God. Now, it isn't that he knew that the sun was not God, but they were dealing with the people that used statues, that they worshiped statues. They had to worship something. And he was trying to make a transition from there. And so when you make transitions, you sometimes make compromises. And so he picked the image of the sun, which is a very good image. If you've got to pick something, at least that's the light. It's all the life and everything that comes from the sun comes to us here. The geometry of the sphere and everything, there's a lot of reasons why. Prana, from a third-dimensional point of view, prana comes from the sun also. Though from fourth-dimensional points of view, prana is anywhere and everywhere. And you see the rays coming from the sun holding the ankh to the nose, to the breath, showing that eternal life comes from the prana and from the sun, it's not a perfect religion that they were giving here, for sure, but it was much, much better than what they had before. And this, by the way, is the lotus flower, which was the symbol for Atlantis. It was the Nepal Mystery School that brought the lotus to India. It's written in India that they did that. And it says the Nepal Mystery School did it. It says right in there. There's several writings about the Nepals that were there even before Buddha, long before Buddha. But here you see them out of the vase and dying because Atlantis was dead and dying. This is the actual stele that came from. And now what you're going to be seeing is the actual height differences. True. Now look at him. Look at his shape, this long skinny neck, little tiny waist and everything. What you're looking at is a very close image of what he really looked like. But I'll show you one here. Now this, when Akhenaten took over, he said, first of all, number one, we have to be truthful. We can't hide anymore because there was a lot of conspiracy and the kind of stuff that's going on now. A lot of that stuff. It would be like a president coming in and saying, okay, all this stuff, we're going to end all this stuff right now. We're going to really end it. And so Ma'at became the primary symbol of the 18th dynasty. Ma'at is the one with the wings with a feather over her, and Ma'at means truth. The essence of truthfulness. And so he changed all kinds of ceremonies, and everything got changed. He went around and re-geomanced all the temples, which they really got pissed at him for doing that. He even changed the art form, where you start seeing, he says, draw it, paint it, make the statues just like you see it. Don't lie. Because to him, when you start making these things, when you start making these people that are standing like this and all these distorted things like that, that's a lie. Because you didn't draw it like you saw it. So he says, all your art has to be just like a photograph. Because he knew about photographs, but you got to, just like what you see. That's how you do it. And so you begin to see the art of the 18th dynasty looks rather modern. And it doesn't look like anything like you ever saw before. Just suddenly this whole new art form came out, which included the statues were to be made just exactly like the person would see. And here is Akhenaten. This is in the Cairo Museum. And according to Thoth, you are now looking at exactly what he looks like. And this thing to the top up here is about almost 15-something feet. He was 14 and a half feet tall from his head to the top of his body. And you're looking exactly at the body, this high waist way up here, coming out with his long, sloping things. His knees are much lower, and his skinny little legs at the bottom. And he had 2 hearts in his body. because Sirius has 2 suns. Most systems are polar suns, and you reflect what's going on in your sun more than you know, I'll tell you. What's happening, the internal processes and things that are going on in there, and the nature of your system that you're in, your bodies reflect this a lot. So anyway, where were we? So this is what he actually looked like, and this is Nefertiti, which was found when I'll explain in just a moment here what happened to. Well, I might as well tell you now, I guess. No, not the right moment. Anyway, this is Nefertiti. She was found in this bust of her was found in Tel El Amarna. They just totally destroyed the city. They removed every rock after he was gone. They didn't want the world to ever know that Akhenaten ever existed. I mean, they went around and they got they combed everything and destroyed everything they could. They completely removed an entire city, stone by stone, and spread it to the world. They went around to all the murals and throughout all of Egypt and erased any mention of Akhenaten. Because, she's asking why, because he was considered the great heretic, because he was the one that destroyed their beloved religion. And so they all hated him. You see, the priesthood hated him because the priesthood were all the millionaires and the powerful people. And he said, you don't need them anymore. God is within you. And the priest said, what? I won't be able to drive my gold chariot anymore. And they did not like to hear that. And then the military was the most powerful military in the world. They were ready to just take over the planet, and they could if they were ready. They were incredible. And Akhenaten was a pacifist and said, no, you can't do that, and made them all come back onto their shore and said, you can't do that. If we're attacked, okay, but other than that, only for defense only. But he was also a very good politician, so he put a lot of the military people in political power places to appease them. But basically, they did not like him because they wanted to go out there and cause hell, and he didn't let them do it. And then the people didn't like him because they all liked their little religions. And they were really into it, and they really believed him with their whole hearts, even though they were going in the wrong direction. It wasn't true. They believed it was true, and they didn't really like this new religion that it was, that everybody was supposed to follow. It would be like George Bush coming in, making all our military come back onto the United States, and saying, okay, there's not all the religions are wiped out. There's going to be the Bush religion, and these kinds of things. I mean, there was a great deal of extreme. People were really, really uptight over this, and the top brotherhood knew that this was going to be incredible, but they had to try. And so they destroyed this whole city. I'll tell you what they did to him in just a moment. They destroyed this whole city, and this was found in an underground room that they didn't know was there. And that's how this survived that. And a few things survived that were hidden in places. So there were a lot of people that really did love Akhenaten and Nefertiti and saw the beauty of what they were trying to do. And so but it was a relatively small group compared to the rest of the country. By the way, underneath this hat, she's always considered like this very beautiful person and everything she is, but she doesn't have a normal skull. She has a much higher skull here, which you can now see. And she's not wearing clothes. That was the other thing, is because they felt that clothes is not being truthful. And so they didn't wear clothes except for ceremonies and certain things like that. But the rest of the time, you just didn't wear clothes. And to just be open on every conceivable way. But a lot of things about her, if you notice, these huge ears, long long, skinny neck. And if you can see, their waist is right underneath their breast. It's not down where we are. It's just like right underneath there. And this kind of a pot belly thing is, it's just part of their nature. This is two of the sisters. This is a little detail of something. Now, what you're looking at is just like an actual, this is just what the artist was seeing here. Again, this really high waist, these little tiny legs underneath here, and these huge skulls, this long neck. And Nefertiti's skull was not anything as big as Akhenaten's or the daughter's. This is an actual one of one of the older daughters when she grew up here. And you can't see the angle. I'll show you the angle in just a moment. But that skull is really big. It really goes back there. And these ears are enormous. Sound and sound vibration and voice sound is a real big part of their lives. Very much like it is with the dolphins. Sound is a very crucial aspect with them also. And so their ears and their hearing sensitivity is way over what we've got going right now. But here you can see, this was another one. You can see how big his skull is. It goes back there like that. It's because they were interpreting the reality from a totally different way, and it required more brain mass back in there to do this. But the amount of brain mass is real important. It's like the biggest brain in the world, other than dolphins, whales, and humans, I think it's the gorillas or whatever they are. They have about 750 milligrams, I think it is, of brain mass. It takes approximately 1,000 milligrams before language is developed. A little baby, when it's approximately a year and a half, 2 years old, or somewhere around in there, that's when their brain mass reaches 1,000 grams. That's what it is, 1,000 grams. And that's when language starts happening. So what they suspect is that when a gorilla ever reaches 1,000 grams, that it will start talking, just like we do. Coco? Can she talk? Sign language. The dolphin, when we're an adult, we have about 1,500 grams average brain. The dolphin brain is 1,850 grams. They have a much bigger brain than us. And so obviously the dolphins are a little bit further along than we are. I mean, in terms of, in a lot of things. They have certain areas of their brain that we don't even know what the heck they are. We don't even know what they do. We don't even know what they're for or anything.
What does the archaeologists say about religion?
They don't know what to say about this. They really don't have any idea at all. Oh yeah, they do. I know what they do say. That's what they say. They say they're sick. They got this disease that caused these bodies to be distorted. That's why. That's what they say. Yeah, it was a real big thing. It was just it was a real big thing. It was a really big. They were really big. I mean, if somebody 14 foot came crawling in this room, it would definitely be a big thing to you, I'll tell you. It was to them too. I mean, they were afraid of these guys. There's no doubt. They were really afraid of them. And anyway, this is one of the teenagers here. Look at this baby.
How many grams do you think they have?
Oh, it's going to be, probably, judging by the size, probably about 2,500 or something. They're about double the size of our brain.
They didn't grow hair.
I don't think they had hair. In fact, most of the vast majority of the ETs, if you're familiar with them or any images, they usually don't have hair. It's kind of not necessary kind of thing.
Beard.
Huh?
Beards?
Oh, well, yeah, they tend, that was a real male macho thing. They really felt that it was important to have this beard right here. The rest of it they would shave, but right here they wanted this long beard. But it was a style. I mean, even Queen Hatshepsut, she was the first female queen that controlled Egypt. And that was such a powerful thing that she went around wearing a beard. You needed that beard, boy. It was real important. But you can see how big this skull is. I mean, for a baby. You can see also why their hips went way out like that. I mean, they had to have these really wide hips to deliver that kind of skull. You may laugh, but that's, you got to get that thing out of there. And it's pretty big. And look how big that ear is compared. It's almost as long as the distance from, the whole face of it. It's huge. I mean, if you were holding that baby, the first thing you would say is, "This is not human."
You look the same way.
Some of the Egyptian births, they used to oblongate the head to mimic at one point.
She was talking about some of the Egyptian births, they would oblong the head. This was true in all three areas of both Egypt, Peru, Yucatan, and in Tibet, is that when the babies would come out, the normal human beings would try to tie off with these tight bands to make the skull grow out like this, because they wanted to mimic the ascended ones. Anyway, here's another one. This is King Tut, and he was only 18 years old when he took over. He took over directly after Akhenaten and Nefertiti. They don't know where he came from. He's not. He has no lineage. They don't know where he showed up or how he came from. He wasn't from Akhenaten and Nefertiti. They don't think, and yet he's still got this bigger skull and these big ears. He's obviously part of it. He was in telepathic communication with Nefertiti and ran the country through her. She ran the country through him. Put it that way. See, what happened was in the very end. This is the part you'll kind of need to know is. The population of Egypt, the military and the priesthood all got together and said, "Let's get rid of this guy." But they couldn't kill him because you can't kill an immortal being. There's nothing you can do. You can do anything you want. Nothing will work. You'll find this out at one point. You can't shoot him. You can't stab him. You can't do anything. Nothing will work because they have a field around them that will just not allow it to take place. You can't poison them. You can't do anything. So they did something very, very, very interesting. It was really ingenious. The actual story goes that they poisoned him because the people who were watching it happen and who wrote it down saw him drink this stuff, which they thought was poison, and they saw him fall over, and he looked like he was dead. And they went there, and he had no heartbeat. And after I read all this stuff, I asked them, I said, "What happened?" And they said, "Well, it was close." And I said, "Well, what happened?" And they said, and he said, they hired 3 black Nubians who were like magicians. And they made this substance, he says, which the closest thing that he could describe to me was what they use in voodoo, where you drink this stuff. It doesn't kill you. It makes your heartbeat and everything go down so slow that you look like you're dead. And so he said what they did is they had this whole sarcophagus created and planned, and when he fell over, then the physician came up and checked him and says, "He's dead." And so everybody thought he was dead, and they immediately carried him out and put him into the sarcophagus and put this magical seal, whatever that means, around the lid and put the lid on. And he then, they never embalmed him, they never did anything. They just put him in there and got rid of him. And took him somewhere and hid him. And until the little bit of the seal broke free, and then his spirit got out of that body and left.
His body was in the sarcophagus.
They've never found it. They've never found any of the bodies, not any of them, except for King Tut. And that was planned. They've never found, he's the only one in all of Egypt from the beginning of time until now that they've ever found a tomb that was intact. And that was part of the deal. They wanted all of those things to be found. They wanted them all to come out into the world because they have very special vibrations. They have the vibration of what he was teaching in them. It was no, I'm sorry, they poisoned Akhenaten, but it was not poison. And now here's what happened with him. I need to say one more thing, and we can ask questions on this. This is Akhenaten's house. It's in New York. This is the Lima Museum in Peru. And in there, just one more quick thing. These are other skulls that have been found in there. There were these huge skulls that were found in Peru. I took the wrong angle. If you got the right angle, you'd see it's the same huge skull and the same kind of thing again. And this is one of my teachers, Kalu Rinpoche. I like to give you his image. He's a Tibetan Lama. He was one of the teachers that I really, really love a lot. And if you could see him, he has a real similar kind of thing. His neck is a real long, skinny neck. This is a collar. His neck is this long, skinny neck that comes up like this kind of thing. But those same skulls have been found in all three of those places. Yeah. Okay. I want to tell you what happened. And this is the important part of all of this. What Akhenaten's purpose was, first of all, it was just to be, just to show you what you're going to become. And then the second of all, he started a school, and the school was called the Egyptian Mystery School of Akhenaten, the Law of One. And the school was a school of immortality, of resurrection, and it was only functionable for 17 and a half years before they had him drink this thing. So he only had 17 and a half years to complete something that he had to do, and he did complete what he needed to do. The next phase of this is that they needed to not just bring an actual form of what we're going to become, but that they needed to bring someone out onto the surface who was half and half. And I'll explain that in just a moment. Part of us and part of the next level. And so to do that, they had to get a very special group together. And that's what the purpose of the Egyptian Mystery School was. And so they began this training. They selected from the people of that were the followers of Akhenaten, that believed in him, people who had done the 12 years of training of the left eye of Horus. The left eye of Horus is the feminine, which is controlled by the right brain, is the female psychic side of things. And so the temples that run, starting in Abu Simbel, that run all the way up there, which are equivalent to the chakra centers in the spine, each one has a different aspect of a school, and I'll talk about this more in a little bit too. And they were there to teach about all the emotional and psychic aspects of the right eye or the left eye of Horus. And so they taught about tantra and sexual energy and emotional body work and fears and all these kinds of things. When someone had been through all of that training after 12 years, and they were at least 45 years old, then they were eligible to go to the right eye of Horus, which is through the Egyptian Mystery School I just mentioned. And out of this, they had a few hundred people that were selected and went through the school. It took 12 years to give the right eye of Horus. The right eye of Horus had never been given before. So on what's written on all of the walls is the left eye, and the missing information, the other half of the information, the male part of the information, was only written in one place in Egypt. And they don't know where that is, because it's down underneath. It's leading way underneath the pyramids. And so that information was never given to them. They never had the full set of what was necessary. And so it was finally given in this school. At the end of 12 years, they then could begin to process the people through an initiation in the Great Pyramid, which I'll describe exactly what they did. And So it means that they only had 5.5 years to reap the benefits of all this work that they've been doing for all this length of time. And this guy must have been the world's greatest teacher, because in 5.5 years they got almost 300 people to realize immortality. He did 300 people in 17.5 years, which is incredible. But of course, if you got a 14.5-foot person sitting there, I guess you'll listen to him and probably really believe what he has to say. But anyway, he was very successful. They were almost all women, almost totally women, and this group then went back underneath with the Todd Brotherhood and remained there. And then in 500 BC, this group as a whole got up, left the Great Pyramids, and migrated over to a place called Masada, Israel. And they became known as the Essene Brotherhood. The Essene Brotherhood, the core of the Essene Brotherhood were these 300 primarily women who were really Egyptians and were immortal beings, had already obtained immortality. And they then created another school around them, another mystery school around them, which contained both males and females, which were the outer aspect of the school, which were ordinary people trying to understand immortality. And Mary was one of these people. Now, if you're Christian, you can just accept this or not, or whatever you want, but this is, I got to say it because this is what I believe. Mary was one of the inner core. She was an immortal being before Jesus was ever born. And she was Egyptian, and she was part of the Egyptian school. A statement in the Bible that could be interpreted many ways, but when God was talking about his son, he would say, what did he say in there? He says, "Out of Egypt will come my son." And many have said, well, that was the time when he went back to Egypt, because Jesus lived in Egypt for a long time. And they said, well, that's what they meant by that. But it could have been interpreted in another way also. But anyway, according to Thoth, Mary was an Egyptian. She was a mortal being. She came from the original school, and she was an Essene. And that Joseph was also an Essene, but he was not an immortal being, and he was from the outer ring. And they crossed the two rings. They crossed the immortal being they crossed immortality with mortality, and it opened the way for a very special spirit to come here, who has a name that I don't want to say, a very beautiful name from somewhere else. And he was one of the most advanced souls that this universe has ever created, and who came from a level of existence totally beyond our imagination at this point, and came down to this extremely low level of life to live a life, who we call Jesus. And it was the cross between Mary and Joseph, between the immortal and the immortal. And so he started out as the Son of Man and became the Son of God. He started out as a mortal person and transmutated into an immortal person and gave the example out to the world. And if you really start looking at things like baptism and all the principles of resurrection and everything, you'll find that these didn't start in Christianity, but all had their roots in Egypt. And even some of them, baptism even further back than that. So, again, you don't have to accept that, but I have to say it. And so now we had a person who was teaching resurrection, the same basic principles of Egypt from the very beginning, only who, again, you can't just talk about it, you've got to do it. And so you've got to actually live it or present everything. It's like a lot of people, and I don't mean to put them down in this way, but a lot of people who teach sacred geometry and what this is about, you get reams and reams and reams of showing it, but then giving no way to bring it in to make it real, no way to ground it into the experience. You got to have that. Without that, knowledge is completely useless. It has no purpose or meaning. And so that's what they were doing, is they were having someone live it and go through the whole process. And so now Jesus gave the final example of what the next step of all this was all about. And so I'm going to leave that there at this point. And we'll ask questions, and we'll just do this for a little bit. I'd like you to ask. Last time what happened was there was only a few people who asked questions, and a lot of people who didn't get to ask questions, so you get one question, I'm sorry. And then you must give it to someone else. So, who's got that? Who's behind me?
We thought to start at the back this time because I didn't hear.
Okay. Hand it in the back. Those guys never get anything. Yeah, those guys in the back know everything.
We're in the front, yes.
Probably. See, we've got a whole another level of consciousness and awareness and information in China and Tibet and all over in there. There's pyramids over there. My sister, who's been all over China, my sister is real famous in China, and they allow her to go anywhere, just about. I don't even know if it's just about. They allow her to go anywhere she wants. And she said that she's been taken to places. She's been to Egypt 22 times. And she said that she's been taken to places in China that make Egypt look like nothing. And yet the rest of the world doesn't even know it's there. It's totally secret. And they've got pyramids all over the place, and they completely deny it, that they're even there. They won't, even if you try to say them. And there's some of them that we finally got photographs of and everything else like that, and they'll say, okay, all right, that one's there. You know, one of the most beautiful pyramids in the world is between the Chinese-Tibetan border. It's the largest pyramid that we know of in the world. It's a solid white capstone. It looks like it was made yesterday from the people that I've had an eyewitness of this. And it's got big, solid white sides with a solid crystal capstone on top of it, going to a sharp point. It's in perfect condition. And there's the doorway into it is open, and you go into this thing, and you go through this thing into this final room, into the middle of this big room. There's no words anywhere, there's no writing, there's no pictures, there's no nothing, except for one. And when you go into the middle, up high in the front wall, this is from an eyewitness that was in it, there's only one thing, and that's the flower of life. It says it all. If you know what the flower of life is, you've just said everything that you could possibly say in this least amount of words. And that one, and say the Tibetan government completely, even though people have been there and photographed it and everything else like that. If you call them, we try to get the precise location and everything. We went 6 months with them trying to get it. And then we finally got, and I talked to one group. It takes 6 months to get to this thing. You've got to really prepare, because you're going through uncharted, unmapped country, and you're going to have food and everything. And when you get there, you've got to get back. So you've got to really time it. The second group that I talked to that got there, they got right to the rim of the valley. They could see it sitting down in the valley, but they had to turn back, because if they went in, they would all die, because they wouldn't have enough food to get back. We're talking about really high and cold, so there's no food, there's no way of getting back. And it's only out of the snow. It's buried under the snow. It's only out of the snow for 3 weeks out of the year. And it's hard to see, because you got a white pyramid in snow. So, but these are the kinds of things that do exist out there, and there's really a lot going on over there. But the Chinese have really, really, really tried to protect it, and I'm glad they have. I'm glad they do. The Tibetans, the Egyptians do the same thing. They, from what we know about in Egypt, you could about triple that on what's hidden. And the Egyptian government knows a great deal of where this stuff is, but they're not going to tell you. They're not going to open it up. They wouldn't do it unless they were forced to somehow. They don't see any reason to bring that out purposely. What's real interesting after that, who would you think they would trust, of course, to make the transition between that dynasty and the next one? Is they made Ai and Taye king and queen, because they were the only ones they tested. So they were king and queen during the transition, and then when Seth came in the 19th dynasty, then Ai turned it over to him because he didn't really want to be king, but they had to make that transition over to and then when Seth came in, he immediately turned it back into exactly what it was before. They erased everything and started right back over. And Akhenaten was then called something exactly what Jesus was called. He was given the name the criminal, worst king that ever lived. But Nefertiti and none of the sisters and daughters and all of them were ever found, not anything. However, about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, they found 2 things in Tel Humana, which was very heartening for me. First one was they found some more burial caskets, and they opened one of them up, and inside, right over the top of the head, where the person was looking up, was the flower of life. I had not been able to tie that to the 18th dynasty before, and so I was glad to see that one. But then they found another casket, which they don't know what to do. It is sitting in the basement of the Cairo Museum right now. But they found this big casket, and they opened it up, and there was the bones of a 7-year-old boy who was 8 feet tall. 7 years old, 8 feet tall. And they don't know what to think about that, but it's physically sitting in Egypt right now. They don't know about the skull. I got this through one of the Egyptologists out of Egypt, and so I didn't get to see this with my eyes. Yeah. Well, wait a minute. I can't. Got to have the stick. Who's got the next question? Do you have it? Who's the next question? She asked the next question here. And then you're next after this one.
What was the difference between Akhenaten putting something into the Akashic records and the pattern that Christ put into it?
Well, Akhenaten was showing that which we would become physically. We're actually going to go through metamorphosis of that. Jesus was showing the pathway out from where we are here to there. So they were working together. The 2 patterns were both necessary. You understand? It's got to go back to her.
When you were talking about Jesus, you said, at least I think you were talking about it, you said, I don't want to say his name. And I just wondered what you're referring to, if you can tell us a little bit about that, and also as far as Jesus being a culmination of Joseph and Mary, a mortal and an immortal, it's always viewed that they never conceived in the normal way.
That's right.
But yet for it to be a culmination of the both, it is from both sides of the equation, so to speak.
Yeah, I'll explain that in just a little bit. We're going to talk about immortality, and I'll explain what they did and how that took place. But what was the first part of the question? Oh, Jesus' name. Well, his name, Jesus, is an earth name. He has another name that's much more ancient, and I don't know if I have the right to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. No, that's all the names that you're going to know of are all earth names. And I don't have a lot of people have other names that come from other places, and they may or may not want that discussed, and I just feel that not talk about that. Okay, we got one more question here that she asked here. We're going to
Have you any information on why Osiris was depicted having a green face and then Akhenaten had a blue face?
Akhenaten had a blue face?
When he met Mut.
I think you mean that on the... I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that Akhenaten in reality had a blue face. Though Osiris was always depicted as having either a green or a light blue face. And I think that's because he was dead when they got him. And they were resurrecting him literally out of the dead. He was a dead person. I think that's what it is. He's sometimes depicted with white also, as having a white face, white body. Okay. Into the Egyptian mystery school of Akhenaten, the law of one. This is the symbol for that school. Though they wouldn't let me draw the symbol exactly as it should be, and if to do it properly, the area inside of this circle should be gold. It's actually the right eye of Horus on the surface of the solar disk, which was the symbol for their religion. Now, it begins in this way. Both the Christian and the Egyptian religions have certain things in common, like I said. They have another thing in common having to do with creation itself. Both of these religions believe that everything came from nothing. I'll read the... they believe that it came from the void, the great void. The Christians call it the great void, or just the void, whereas the Egyptians call it the duat. I'm going to take my glasses off here. Chapter 1, this is of Genesis. I'm just going to read the first three sentences, or three numbers, rather, of chapter 1. And it says, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth." So, we don't know who God is, but that's who created the heaven and the earth. Number 2, "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." And immediately after that, number 3, it says, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light." There's a statement in, first of all, you see that in the beginning the earth was void and without form. There's nothing. Voidness is nothing. And then the next thing that happened is the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, or the deep. And then this movement, immediately after the movement, he said, let there be light. Well, from an Egyptian point of view, this is a very simplified version of their belief. And that there is something missing in this belief, which from a physicist's point of view would absolutely have to be there, otherwise this could not take place. This is impossible, absolutely impossible from a physical point of view, in the sense that if you have, again, there's 144 different kinds of voidness, but in 3D space, like we're in, voidness simply means space with nothing in it, no thing. No molecules, no light, no anything at all. Well, if you were in 3D space, imagine yourself being in deep, deep space, and, okay, you got a body, you can keep that much, but nothing else. And it's infinite, below you, above you, behind you, all the way around you, just infinite forever nothingness. And then you decided to move. First thing it did was God moved on the face of the water. So you're going to move. How can you move? How's that possible? If you're going to move from here to over there, how do you know you did it? Or if you turned around, how do you know you turned around? In physics, movement, kinetic energy, requires 2 points. It requires something to move relative to. There has to be something else first before movement's possible. You've got to have something here. If you got something here, then you can move relative to it. You can move around it. You can rotate relative to it, everything else. But if there is only 1 point, movement or kinetic energy is impossible. It has no meaning, no definition. There's no way for it to be determined. The Egyptians, in their understanding of the same thing, say that there is a step in between there. And so their training is this. They also believe that the great void, or the Dawat, is the source of all things, and that the only thing that is required in the great void is spirit. Just spirit and nothingness, and that is the source of all things. And they also believe that it is the movement of spirit that creates the worlds. But they have a step in the middle, and this is what they do. They believe that spirit contains within it, within spirit, not talking about body, just spirit, contains within itself, or consciousness, however you want to look at it, contains within it the key to getting out of or beginning the process of movement from the great void. And that key has to do with the directions, the sacred directions of the American Indians, the east, west, south, north, etc., or the sacred directions of the Kabbalah, of the east, west, north, south, up and down, of the 4 angels of Michael and Ariel and Gabriel and Raphael and Ariel and Metatron. These directions, these are very, very sacred directions. And for many people, you might think, well, so what? I mean, what does directions have? What is so important about directions? Well, when you're getting out of the great void, they're really important. And if you were to walk down this hallway, and the hallway was dark, but just say real dimly lit, and you could barely see in there, and you came into this room, which was absolutely black. You came up to the double doors over there, and you could just barely see the outline of the door, but you couldn't see inside there at all. You could walk up to that doorway and just step in just a little bit, and now you're in this total darkness. And we all have this innate ability to project a certain distance into the darkness. We can, without using our hands or anything, we can just kind of sense or feel if there's anything directly in front of us for a certain distance. It may only be an inch, maybe it's 2 or 3 inches, maybe it's a foot, or maybe it's 3 feet or more. Everybody's different. There's a certain distance you can go, and you just know nothing's there. And you keep going, and all of a sudden your knowing quits. You're not sure anymore, and you can't go any further. You don't know if there's anything there or not. And so you've got this little line, or this projection line, that will go out into the void a certain distance. That is the essential element of consciousness that begins the process, according to the Egyptians. And we have that in 6 directions. We have it in front, and it's the same distance in all 6 directions. Our ability to project into the voidness is equal in all directions. We can't go further to the left than we can to the right. And so we can project whatever that projection in front of us, we'll find that we can do the same distance to the sides, to the back, and above us, and front of, and below us. If we're thinking of ourselves as just a spirit And if you want to think of that, you can think of yourself as a round sphere, maybe, when you're spirit, that you really have no form. You have this, so you get these 6 little beams that come out a certain distance. Once, so the training in Egypt was as they would get them used to projecting these beams out. Once they projected these beams, and they would get them to project them out a certain distance. The distance was 27.5 feet, approximately. They chose that because that's the outer rim of your energy fields. And so they'd have you project a beam out 27.5 feet in each direction. You'd learn until you could do that. They would train you. You can get these 6 little beams going out. And then you've got 2 going this way, and you've got 2 going that way, and you've got 2 going this way. Okay, you all got the directions clear. So you got these form a square around you, right? If you were to see them from above, here's the person. This is looking. You'd have one going out this way, one going that way, one going this way, and one going that way, and then of course one going this way. So these are the 4 that are around you this way. They would then have the person project those beams out, those 27.5 feet approximately, and then they would have them connect them together like this, forming this flat square or diamond around them. And then they would, from these 4 corners, they would run these beams up to the top one and form a pyramid around them. And then they would run the beams down and form a pyramid facing down below them. By the way, most of the pyramids in Egypt have a pyramid going in the earth as well as above the earth, centered right on the earth, to form that pattern going down the earth. So they form these 2 pyramids, which is called an octahedron, which looks like this. You can see it from this is the square, the flat plane that would be around us. So this is the front, this is the back, this is the left, the right, and the up, and the down. They form this shape around their body. These 2 back-to-back pyramids. And so they go into the great void, and they form these 2 big pyramids. They're 27.5 feet. They're 55 feet across. In there, they form these things around them. Okay, that's the first step they do before they do anything. Well, once they've created this, and it's just mental patterns. It's nothing, right? Just mental patterns. But once the form has been created around the spirit, kinetic energy or movement is now possible. The little spirit could come outside and rotate around this thing and come down here and move over here, or it could rotate inside of it, or it could sit still and rotate this. There's lots of possibilities that can be there. And these possibilities were without it. There's nothing, there's no way to move because there's no way to know if motion's taking place. But with it, motion's completely possible. Does everybody understand that? Any problem with that? Okay. So now there are other ways that this could take place, but this is the way that this particular school gave the training. They have to proceed in one way or another, and this is the way they proceeded. So this isn't the only way that one can proceed from here. In fact, there is some other real interesting ways that this could be done, but this is what they were taught. They were then taught to rotate, as they sat still, they were then taught to rotate the entire thing like this. It didn't matter, it didn't matter if they went forward or backwards, just in other words, you're using this axis. And so you're rotating either forward or back like that. Then you would switch to the front-back axis and rotate either to the left or to the right, doesn't matter. And then go to the top axis and rotate either to the left or to the right, doesn't matter, from that way. Now what that does is it traces the parameters of a sphere. And you have a perfect sphere if you rotate all these through all the different patterns. And so you now have this sphere around you. And once they get the sphere around them, they're then told to drop this image. And so they drop this, and they go to, and I wish I had one, but I don't have one. They go to a perfect little sphere. I do have a little one. It's very little. So they go to a sphere. The reason they switch from the sphere, from the octahedron, it's called an octahedron, that form is, to a sphere, is that the movements are easier and less complicated. The movements that they're going to make afterwards to create the reality. Though the reality could be created through angles, it's easier to do it through a sphericalness. Now, another thing that I need to just bring up here real quickly, a point, is that there are two kinds of lines in sacred geometry. One is called male, and the other is called female. A male line is any line that is straight. That's a male line. Any line that is not straight is female, no matter what it is, if it's curved. In other words, this is a female line. That's a female line. And the most female of all female lines is a circle. And the most female of all female shapes is a sphere. And so also in the belief of the Christian Bible is that first there was Adam was created, and then Eve. And Eve was created from Adam. Male came first, female created from that. And the Egyptian belief, only in terms of geometrical things, is that the male form was created first. It was purely straight lines. And then the female form created from it was created second. So here's this little spirit now inside of this big round sphere, and he's sitting right in the center of it, he or she. Spirit's not really male or female. So the spirit is sitting inside of the sphere. Well, spirit could sit there forever. There's really no time at this point. Time doesn't exist. Time didn't actually exist at all until that was created. Until the octahedron was created. You have to have something. There has to be something to have a continuum. Time is not, there's no such thing as time. There's only continuum of space. Time is a mental thing that we've created up. What are you going to do with time? Where are you going to get it? Where is it? What is it? It's nothing. It doesn't exist. It's nothing at all. All there is the continuum of an object continuing through time, what we call. But time doesn't exist. It's just the continuum of space is all there is. And so once the object was created, then time, what we, as our mind thinks of it, was also simultaneously created. So the little person could sit inside this big sphere for a long, long, long time until finally he says, or he or she says, I think I'll do something. And there is one very specific thing that could be done that would be unique. I guess there's a lot of unique things you could do, but there's one. The training was, let's put it this way, the training is that you're to, once you create the sphere, you go to that which was newly created. That was the instructions. That's always the instructions, is to go to the new thing that was created. Well, what is it that was new, that was created? The membrane. There's now an inside and an outside, and there's this membrane of the sphere that separates those two, and that is different than anything else that's in the entire universe. And so where you're instructed to go to is to the membrane, to the surface of the sphere. You can't make a mistake. It doesn't make any difference where you go on the sphere. You can go down, up, and it doesn't make any difference how you get there. You can curve over there, make a straight line, or meander sideways, or whatever you want. But you get there, and when you get to the surface, now you're now in position, And at that point, you only know how to do one thing. That's the limit of your memory at this point, and that is you know how to do two things, an octahedron or a sphere, but you're switched to sphericalness now. And so you move up to the surface of the sphere, somewhere on it, at which point you make another sphere. And you only know how to make one size sphere. You don't know how to make two sizes, you only know how to make one size. So you make another sphere exactly the same as this one. Here's your first sphere. And let's say that you moved up here to the top. I'm going to choose that spot because it's more convenient, but it doesn't really matter. You moved right here. And you make another sphere. Well, the other sphere is going to be such that this is going to be the center of it. And so it creates a very sacred form in sacred geometry, and it's probably the most sacred of the sacred forms there are, just about. This little mouth shape in here. In other words, here's where you were, and here's the surface, and when you moved up to here, you created a sphere the same size, which causes the surface of that one to pass through where you were. So these two surfaces pass through the centers of these two circles. And this shape in here is called a vesica Pisces. And it is the creation pattern of things that, like the golden mean ratio and these kinds of things, is what creates that. And we'll talk about it a little bit. But this image that you see right here has a hidden image underneath it, which you will see later to be the image of light itself. It is the morphogenic structure of that which created light. Just the stuff that we've got falling in the room here right now. And what was the very next thing that God said after He made the first motion? He made the very first motion, and immediately He said, "Let there be light." He couldn't have done it the other way around. And said, "Let there be light so I can see where I'm moving." He had to make this motion first to create this pattern, and once this pattern was created, he could say, "Let there be light," because it was through the pattern that light was created. And I'll be able to really show you this on a real hardcore science level in a little bit, though at this point it's too simple. You won't be able to get it from here because it's too simple. It's too obvious. Too easy. And so, but remember this, because we'll wait about 2 days down the line, I'll come back to this and I'll be able to show you what I'm talking about after we make it more complex. And now, at this point, now that he's made the circle up here, and I'll show you this on the slides here. Let me come to the slides. That's the Great Void. It was really the hardest drawing I ever did because I couldn't find a clean card. And that's the Great Void. And then inside the Great Void is the Spirit of God, which we'll use the symbol of the right eye of Horus. And then these, I did them all at once here. These are the 6 little beams coming out. And I didn't show the step of the octahedron forming or the spinning of it, but just that it forms a sphere. And then from that, the little right eye of Horus, the Spirit of God, ends up inside of this circle or this sphere, which is the symbol for the school. Now this is where the Spirit then makes a move from here to somewhere on the surface. Again, you can't make an error, but we will go to that spot. And it goes to there. And when it gets there, it only knows how to do one thing, and that is to make spheres. And so it makes another sphere, and you see the vesica Pisces is formed. And the gold one is the first circle that was formed, and this is the second one. Now, what does it do next? Well, it goes to that what was newly created. And there was only one thing that's new and different in the universe now, and that is the place where the two circles meet. If you think of two soap bubbles together, there's a circle around there. not a sphere, a circle, where the two bubbles come together, which is that green line. So that green line is not just a line. If you were to look at it from above, looking down, you would see this. The gold and the black circle will, of course, coincide with each other, but the place that they meet would look like an inner circle. Does everybody get that? Anybody not get it? Okay. So this is the side view of it. This is the top view of it. Now in the side view, so the little spirit then goes down to that green ring. Doesn't make any difference where it goes. Can't make a mistake. Just goes somewhere onto the green ring. However, for our purposes, I'm going to choose this spot right here. No matter where you move, I can rotate that object so it looks like it's right there. Okay? Depends on the angle you're at. So I'm going to pick right there. And so it goes down to the green ring, and once it gets to that spot, it only knows how to do one thing, and that makes a sphere of a certain size, and it does it, and it gets this. There are certain geometrical informations that are now present. An equilateral triangle is there, for example. There are two equilateral triangles, which is the basis of the golden mean rectangle. The logarithmic spiral is present. There's all kinds of very primary laws that are unfolding at this moment. This is on the second day. I didn't mention this to you. Do this if you want to, and I'm going to leave this up to you to do it if you want. But if you will look at what I'm about to tell you right now, and then read the Bible again, it will take on a whole new viewpoint that you probably never ever thought about before. But there are 6 days of Genesis, 7 days of Genesis total. Each day has new things that are created each time, and you'll see some interesting things. This is the first motion from here to here. The first motion creates this black circle, and that's the first day of Genesis up here at the first motion. Okay, the second day of Genesis comes over to here. There's the first motion, first circle, second motion, second circle. This is the second day of Genesis. The first motion created light. The second motion creates various things, and if you want to correspond all these various attributes that are created each time, it will all begin to make sense in a whole nother way. You'll see the geometrical nature of this. And I think that at this point I want to do something. I think I want to do this. Let me explain it very carefully, because there's a point that I want to make, and I think I can explain this point to you. Normally what I do is have you go out into deep space and go through this motion, where you create the big sphere, and then you literally move in space over to the surface. Not just words or something like that, but you do it in your meditation. You move over to the place, and you feel yourself moving, you come up to the place, and then you create another sphere. And then you look down, and you see this ring below you, and then you move down to the ring. And then you create another sphere. And take you that far. It's only that far. And at which point, when you're out there in that meditation, you're in deep space, and everything's, the room's gone and everything, but I tell you something. The reason why I have you to go through all that, which is that that all the from here on out, you're going to start seeing a lot of geometrical forms, and they're going to get more and more and more complex. And as they do, you may forget that what the source of all these forms were, which was coming out of the great void, and that it was spirit that was making these forms through its motions. And if you really, really, really want to understand what this is all about, especially if you study sacred geometry later, you must always remember that it's not just lines on a page, or circles, or squares, or tetrahedrons, or dodecahedrons, or whatever. It's not just lines or three-dimensional forms, but they're always maps. They're movements of how spirit moves in the great void. And so that's what I mean by the chromosomes are geometrical images because they're really maps of how spirit has moved in the great void to create the world in a particular way. And each one creates a different consciousness. And consciousness simply is just a different interpretation. How you interpret it. It's like a lens that you look through at one object and interpret it. There's only one reality. Reality doesn't change. But there's different interpretations of the reality. How you perceive the reality and yourself within it. And so this is what I really want to emphasize at this point, is that it's all motion, it's movements, it's maps, it's not just lines and circles. As long as you can get that, then you'll have a much deeper understanding of what we're about to lead into. Now, the next thing is that no matter how the first two motions were made, like I said, you can't make a mistake. No matter where you go onto the circle, onto the sphere, no matter where you go onto the surface of this little sphere, no matter where you go onto that circle that joins the first two spheres together, the two bubbles, you happen to be making a perfect line around the equator. You found an equator on there. There's an infinite number of them. You located one of them, and you began to make a motion perfectly around a perfect equator. Not at an angle or off to one point or anything else like that, but precisely around the equator. And so it's a vortex motion that began starting from here, and you started making that motion exactly on the equator. And once the motion has began, then from then on in, you just follow your heart, kind of. You just keep making the motion to the equator. So you come from here and you automatically move down to here, following the equator. The first two motions are a little different. The third motion is from then on out. You only have to do this same motion over and over and over again. The third day of Genesis comes down to here like this. On the fourth day of Genesis, you come to this spot here. There are over 900 Bibles in the world. 900 Bibles. In about 50% of them or so, it says that on the fourth day of Genesis, that exactly one half of creation was created. You can actually see it geometrically because on the 1, 2, 3, fourth day of Genesis, half of the original circle was transversed. Half of creation was completed. It then goes to the fifth day of Genesis here, fifth motion, and finally to the sixth motion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 motions. And on the sixth motion, this pattern is formed. And also, sort of a geometrical miracle takes place. And geometrically, what happens is the sixth circle comes back and completes exactly to the starting point with nothing left over at all. It is just perfect. And so on the sixth day of Genesis, they all say, all the Bibles say, that creation was completed on the sixth motion. And then it says, on the seventh motion, that he rested. He says on the seventh day, the seventh motion, he rested. Because on the sixth day it was done, but they're saying that there's really 7 circles. So the seventh motion back into the center again, there's no creation that takes place in that motion. It was finished really on the sixth one. And so this pattern we're going to call the Genesis pattern. And it is the pattern through which the entire reality was created. And I hope to make that clear to your logical mind, your left brain side of you, that this is true. You are also looking at what you're going to find now is that there are going to be vortex motions. There's going to be a continually rotating motion of spirit as it extends out of this pattern. And each time that spirit makes one complete vortex, a three-dimensional shape for our world anyway, a three-dimensional shape that you can hold in your hand is created and formed. And that these three-dimensional shapes are the keys or the building blocks of the reality. And you're now looking at the first one. The very, very first three-dimensional shape is before your eyes in a very unusual way. In mathematics, this one circle with 6 around them is the minimum amount of lines that you can make to create what is called a tube torus. If you simply rotated that right now, you would get what is this. This is called a tube torus. It's like a donut. Nothing special. We all know donuts. But it is a totally unique shape. There is nothing else in the universe like this. So everybody see how if you spun those 6 spheres, you would get one of these? You know. Okay, so what is this? Well, I didn't know what the heck it was either when I first got it, and I didn't know what I had. This was through the work of the angels at this time, not through Metatron. This is where this part here right now is coming out. This is 20-something years ago that I started doing this. And I studied this, and after a while, when I started teaching these things, about 7.5 years ago, I still didn't really know at that point what this was. And then one day, it started very soon after I started teaching this. I got a group of people from Hollywood that came to my doorstep that were interested in what I was doing because they were doing some work in Finland that seemed to be related to what I was doing, and they were trying to figure out some things. And there was a man named Eeyore Bach. Has anybody heard of Eeyore Bach? You have? Anybody else heard of Eeyore Bach? He was one of the last, according to the story, there were 12 Bach brothers that were from Finland. And that this family of these 12 males, there was this whole story around how he had this hit squad that went around just looking and doing everything they could to kill these 12 men. And they got 11 of them. He killed 11 of them. He didn't get Eeyore. And according to their family history, he wouldn't get Eeyore. And when Eeyore became the last one, that the female aspect of their family was to come to them, to come to Eeyore and tell him some things that he didn't know, and which was the history of the Earth, going back the same number of years that Thoth says we went back, 500 million years, saying that that's when we all began, was 500 million years ago. And the method that these 2 women, that there were only 2, his grandmother and someone else, the method that they were to remember what the history of the Earth was through a geometrical pattern, which was this. And what they did was this pattern, was they ratcheted the pattern. Now, in sacred geometry, ratcheting means, imagine if there was 2 of those patterns superimposed over each other right now. One right over the top of the other one. And one of them you remain fixed, and the other one you could turn. So you know, like in ratcheting, you go, so you move something a certain number of degrees or so. Well, you were going to move the second circle from here over to here. And when you do, you'd have 12 circles moving around there. So everybody see that? Well, if you had 6 here and they're fixed, and you got another set of these, and you took another set and superimposed over top of this one, but where the center of this one would be here, then you'd have another circle here and another circle here, and you'd have 12 circles moving around it. It would look like this. And so here, there's 12 of these circles moving around here. Now, what these 2 women did is they connected all possible lines that come out of these 12 circles. You can see how this main line, these radial lines coming in that they drew, they do those all over, and then they connected all possible lines together, creating this intricate pattern in the center between the creation, the Genesis pattern that had been ratcheted. They say that all languages are contained in those lines, the actual letters of all languages. This is what they said. Now, I just sat there listening to this stuff. I didn't know. I had about 30 people in my room, and they had TV cameras and all this stuff going on, and I didn't know what they were talking about really at the first part. He said that they then ratcheted it one more time, so they got 24 circles, and when you do, you get this super intricate pattern inside the middle, like this. And that inside here were all the languages written in here, and he tried to make a simple pattern to show me what I was talking about, like this. This is it. He made this while they brought this in. They had been creating it on the airplane and everything as they were coming over. And here, this is English in here. So you see the letter A and W and V and all the various letters in the English alphabet he was starting to put in there, around there. And I looked at this in my mind. I'm going, oh, come on, you can put any old language in there. There's so many lines in there. You could, it'd be easy to draw anything in there. And so, but I'm sitting there real straight going, yeah, okay. And so, but he was doing it with this more intricate pattern like this one. And according to him, again, they're just repeating what they saw, and you'll understand why they got so excited in just a moment. According to the Eeyore, the lines that were arranged in here, once you put the letters in there, the line that would come off of one of them would form what's called a transcendental pattern. A transcendental number in mathematics is a number that has no end. A good example of that is the phi ratio. We're going to be talking about the phi ratio, so I'll use that one. Phi is a Greek symbol phi, which is spelled P-H-I, and it's a number that is 1.6180339, and it goes to infinity. And there is no end. If you put a computer in it, the computer can't find an end, no matter how long the computer runs, or how many computer chips there are in there, and they've done it on this number. And it'll never repeat itself. You never know what the next number is going to be. It could be anything. You never have any idea whatsoever. There's no pattern. There's no way to determine what the next number is going to be. It's a number from another dimensional level. That probably is a whole number up there, but in here, it won't work. It just simply doesn't fit into this world. And so this is called a transcendental pattern, meaning that once you come off of a line off of one letter, it'll come down to another letter. And then the reflection from there will go up to another letter, but you never know where the reflection is going to go. And what they said is that you start with A, and it'll start making these letters, which will form words, which will form sentences, which will tell you the history of the earth, going back, starting from the beginning, 500 million years ago, step by step by step by step, all the way through everything that happened, all the different cultures for 500 million years. It's pretty outrageous. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what they told me. And in this story, as it unfolded, toward the end, which I assume that when they started talking about Lemuria and Atlantis, they're probably in the last couple, it took 20 years for these 2 hours a day for 20 years for these two women to tell Eeyore the whole story, to read the whole thing and tell the whole story. So if it took 20 years and they're going 500 million years, then probably it was the last week or something that they talked about Lemuria and Atlantis. And it would have been toward the very, very end of all this. And but in the story, after they got done with the history, then the story started talking about Eeyore himself, because he was supposedly a king of the earth, according to this thing, and that his fathers and fathers and fathers went back for kings that had gone back all the way since the very, very beginning. They were hidden kings on the earth, according to him. And that they had a temple in Finland. And so he was told, I mean, this sounds like science fiction, except that I saw it on video. I watched the whole thing. It was so, if they hadn't brought the videos, I think I'd have kicked them out. According to this story, he was to go to this particular mountain. and to dig in this particular spot. And before he ever did, they went and got a permit to do this, archaeological permit and everything else like that. Did the whole thing legally through it. They got the whole stuff. And they went to the spot, and they started digging. And they got the TV's cameras on it. And I sat there for 6 hours, man, watching just about every shovel full. It was 30 days, but they condensed 30 days into 6 hours. And I felt like it was about 2 months. Because, I mean, they went, and there's about 30 or 40 of them doing this digging. And what they told them is that they would dig down a certain number of feet and they would find a granite slab. The granite slab would weigh 200 or 300 tons, would be approximately from here to the wall in length, about, I think it was about 6 or 7 feet wide and about this deep, polished like mirror. They would find this granite slab in there. And underneath that granite slab would be about 6 inches of red clay. And the people from Hollywood analyzed the clay. The clay doesn't even exist in Finland. And then underneath that there would be this granite slab like this. And then this red clay. Should use red. And then another granite slab. And then this red clay in here. And then another granite slab. These huge, enormous slabs. And then another thing of red clay. And then another granite slab. And then more red clay. And then another granite slab. And then more red clay. And then another granite slab. 6 of them. It's like the creative thing of the I Ching. 6 straight lines. And this was about 6 or 7 feet under the earth. It wasn't that far. And so these guys dig down. So here it is. And they clear the whole thing out, and you can see it. It's this big, huge piece of granite. Only these guys are, they're all Finnish hippies, you know. They're not archaeologists. And they're going, well, how are we going to get this out of here? I don't know. They couldn't lift it. I mean, you couldn't, I mean, even a crane. I mean, how are you going to lift 200 or 300 tons, you know? And so they decided to blow it up. And that's what they did. I watched them under the thing. They stuck dynamite on this thing. They blew it all to bits. And they carried the pieces out. And they blew the next one up. And they blew the next one up. And they blew the next one up. And they just blasted their way through this thing. I couldn't believe they were doing this. And then, according to the story, after they got through this, then there would be, the mountain would be carved out by hand underneath there. Because they were right at the base of this mountain. And there would be a carving out, and it would go into a wedge like this. And you could see they cleared out all this stuff going all the way down. It's like 40, 50 feet going down into this mountain. And here was this perfect wedge with all this sacred geometry etched into the walls. That's the part I was, look at this stuff, man. And going all the way down, and at the bottom they would come to this door. They told me in advance, before they even started digging, this is what the story was. And they got down to the bottom, and here was this false door that had been carved into the side of the mountain. It looked like a door, but it was just a false door carved into it. They were then told that on the other side it was hollow, and there was a passageway. The passageway would go down, and then it would curve up, and then curve to the left, and then begin a vortex going like this, deep into the earth. I believe what they said, 10 miles into the earth, with 15 million rooms off of this hallway. I mean, that's pretty outrageous, no matter how you look at it. But that's what they said. And that the first 200 or 300 of these rooms would have a gold, full-size life statue of the kings that Bach represented. His father's father. Going all the way down there. And in there were all these treasures associated with each one of these different kings. And then underneath that were rooms that were associated for other people. I don't know what this all was. And so I watched all this stuff, and they got down to the room, and and he's drilling this. You see him with one of these jackhammers going like this in this door. It's supposed to be hollow on the other side, and he goes like this. He goes pop through like this. The guy almost falls over like this, and he pulls the thing out. And then they said, well, what do we do now? And at that moment, according to the story, as soon as they popped through and made the hole, that it was hollow, the Neora was to go to India for 6 months and to study with somebody. And so I got them after they just popped through. Eeyore was still in India, and they're in my room showing me these videos about this thing. And so they're going, well, what do you think? I don't know. All I could say was that this was a sacred pattern, but I didn't know. I didn't know. So they promised me that as soon as Eeyore went in there, they were going to go over there and film the whole thing, and they would let me know what happened. 6 months went by, and not a word. A long time went by, and I finally called one of these guys up, and I said, hey, whatever happened on that? He goes, we don't know. He won't let us. Eeyore went in, and then dead silence. Wouldn't let anybody film it, wouldn't let anybody come over, wouldn't let anybody see anything. They won't talk about it anymore, nothing. It's just, that's it. And so I don't know what's happened on that. So I took this and put it, I have this big file of weird things. Put it in my weird thing file and filed it in there with all this stuff that somehow is attracted to me all the time. I don't know how I did it. And put it in there, and I figured, well, maybe someday it'll make sense. Now, I don't know. But in terms of language being in there, that was the first time I'd ever heard that language was associated with this. But I didn't believe it, and I didn't know what to think about it. Then sometime later, a couple of years went by, and a man named Dan Winter came to my house, and we sat down and had a good time talking about sacred. He's another guy involved in sacred geometry up in New York, and he's done a lot of real interesting things with sacred geometry that are really pretty good. And he's a good guy. He's really trying to solve a lot of the world's problems.
The universe is comprised of a single, contiguous, folded surface. And when a disturbance or perturbation strikes that medium, there is a natural tendency for toroidal donut-like shapes to occur folded in that space. The torus donut is self-standing because it folds as wave and stores inertia in 3 kinds of spin at once: X, Y, and Z axis spin. So this way of self-conserving inertia in toroidal donut forms is the way the beginning of the universe occurred. So we can attempt to record and describe mathematically what happens when a drop touches the folded surface. This is actually a 3D map of a sine wave animated mathematically, but we can see that this folded surface is constantly recording the shape of the wave that's being permitted to stand on it. And note how you get this dimpling donut spiral kind of foldedness that constantly records shape. And if the universe is a unified field and compressible medium, shape is really the only thing that we have to remember. Shape has to record all of the forms we call matter. These toroidal donut-shaped domains or fields, or field effects, as they're called, nest concentrically, even fractally, and the way they embed one inside each other is a clue for how the beginning of things that we call atoms, these waves use the universal language of pressure, storing inertial momentum, to remember the language of shape. And shape is everything we have to remember, because in a unified field, only shape is stored to remember. Later we'll look at how the heart muscle itself is layered according to these viewpoints of spin symmetry, and how emotion and events in the body are following the same wave language. But first, we'll look at the actual creation of the atomic table from the wave shape of these domain donuts. This is 3 donuts spinning at 90 degrees to each other, nesting into what we'll eventually see is actually the creation of the shape of a cube, which is 3 perpendicular, you might think of them as orbitals. This will have a chemical meaning later when we think of the pi suborbital. Here we're going to actually begin to create the shape of a cube. Here's another view of those 3 vortex light cone domains. As they tilt into the cubic array, 3 perpendicular domains can phase lock, and this symmetry among domains is later what we're going to call quantum theory. It's important to remember that what our cookbook to chemistry is the memory of how to tilt these nifty little donut domain doohickeys. The simplest possible arrangement of faces to make a platonic solid is called the tetrahedron. It's called this because it has 4 faces. If we see that the simplest possible arrangement of light cones here is 4 vortex faces converging to make the tetrahedron. So 4 pairs of them will make the next view, which is the octahedron. 4 individual light cones make the tetrahedron. We'll later see that the viewpoints of the tetrahedron have more symmetry or more mirror spin axes than any of the other platonic solids. And later we'll be able to build more beautiful and complex platonic symmetry arrays. This is based on the dodecahedron. This is 6 pair or 12 light cones nested in the arrangement of the dodecahedron. Notice the beautiful pentagonal flowering symmetry shape. So again, let's remember the simple shape of 2 of these donuts nested together spinning. Notice the geometry in the center there, created because the 2 of them are spinning and they're phase locked. They're nested. See the outline of the square there? The cube is implied. You see another view of that. And this is the same form. We've just added the 3rd donut. So now it's spinning on the z-axis, the x-axis, and the y-axis. There's a beautiful cube in there. 3 spinning donuts. Note how the simple sine wave, when we spin it around, actually makes the donut. So it actually, the cross-section of the symbol for the Tao is really built on the sine wave. And then we can take the same embedded nesting of the long wave on the short wave of sine waves to make electron shells and orbitals and eventually braid them into the 3D forms that we know of as membranes and objects. We braid those nested embedded waveforms into symmetry space and we can make a sphere. It's really necessary for the universe to invent ways for sine waves to nest before she can create 3D balloons and membranes and bubbles, things that have surface. And remember, all of this was done by simply remembering how to spin a donut in 3 dimensions or 3 axes of spin. So this prepare the field effect, the domain that we have to do with our attention boils down to this issue of remembering how to spin the donuts. So the number of dimensions is the number of spins that are superposed. The only sense in which dimension has any meaning is this superposition or concentricity of axes of spin or rotation. So what we've been calling dimension has really been the ability of wave, donut, vortex fields to be superposed. This is important because now we're going to get the sense of if we want to live in more than one dimension at once with respect to our attention or awareness or consciousness, we must be able to focus or phase lock or cohere with these field effects. And this is what happens with emotion in the body, which is we'll look more at in a little while. By tracing the path down 2 light cones, we've actually put 10 spirals of the golden mean on that light cone and traced a beautiful series of overlays suggesting how organic shifts occur when these field effects occur in light cones. It's fun to play with. And then we reach center. This is another animation similar to the one that we started with, showing the relationships of 4 light cones nested and spinning. So this spiral of golden mean, if we see it from above, going down a cone and then rotated to the side, begins to look like the tongue of the serpent there. Hence the term serpent power. And later we're going to revolve this form into something we call the Grail cup. This is reminiscent of how it is that we get this recursion from a large world into the small, idealized by this golden mean spiral. So we can take this spiral now. This is one spiral seen from 4 views. The top left is a top view, and then to the right we have a side view. Bottom left is another side view, and bottom right is an oblique view. And then we begin to revolve this spiral, and we get a cup shape. This cup is infinitely recursive. We could zoom into it. First, let's turn it around to see the different viewpoints of the cup.
There are 7 regions that will map onto perfectly. Just as there are 7 spheres that will fit together into that thing, there are 7 regions that map perfectly onto this, and they just gave them 7 different colors. It's called the 7-color map that was on there. If you really want to understand that, I suggest you get a mathematical book and read all the thesis of it. It's from Arthur Young. And so it is. They've mapped other maps onto these now. And these 7 regions are associated with the heart. The heart has 7 regions and 7 muscles, and they move according to this. There's a direct association with the 7 regions of the tube torus and the heart, the human heart. Yes, Dan Winters.
A question about
I'll get you next.
about our origins. It's not directly about this, but it is something that we covered that I feel would be useful to have explained just a little bit further. We had the Hebrews and we had the Martians come to this earth. Was there such a thing as original earthlings, and where are they in the scheme of things today?
The image that Sloth gave to me was that the earth has been like a womb for many, many, many different races and consciousnesses of beings that have come here, different kinds of lots of different kinds of consciousness, going back 500 million years. And these races go through these 5 stages, and then they leave. They completely leave the whole octave. They go do something totally different than be where there's planets and this kind of beingness. And
They leave through ascension?
Well, ascension, as we know, ascension is going from one level to another level. Now, the final phase is beyond ascension. It's actually going on to another way of being. When you reach the 55-foot level and you become that perfection, then at that point there is something that we are capable of doing that we can't really talk about at this level. It's something beyond all of this. We go beyond it. So the Earth becomes like a breeding ground of these to create these races that go on to this other place. And at one point they just stopped all of that, and they all died because they couldn't procreate. So the slave race basically died out. And this new aspect of it with Adam and Eve is what we are. That's where we came from. And so there's nothing. I don't see there being any such thing as an original Earthling. Everybody has come from somewhere else. And ultimately, we all came from outside of the system. And at that point, we were just one being, one spirit. It was just one, and we came in and diffracted into this place, and we've diffracted, and we've diffracted, and we've diffracted, and we've diffracted, further and further, further down. And this is about as far down as you can go in the diffraction. But I don't really, if you were to look at these diffractions where they came from, we've all come from different places. If you want to say where we came from, but even when you get to that place, you say, well, I came from Sirius. When you get to Sirius, you find that a fraction that you aren't really from Sirius, because you track it further enough down within the air, you've come from somewhere else. And if you keep following that back, you'll keep going. And if you go back up the diffraction rate, you'll keep coming back until you come to this place where you've gone at, where you go outside of it, outside of the system. This whole waveform universe is something that was created from a sphere by one person, one spirit, whose name was Metatron. This is my belief. And he sat in this circle with these particular beings and conceived of the idea of a sphere from which everything else was created through. And this is an experiment. We live in an experiment. It's just it's a test case. See how it would work. And it's not complete. We don't know what the end result is yet. We're not all the way through it. We're like a rose that is just a little bud that is still opening, and it hasn't actually formed a rose, and we're not sure what it's really going to look like. There are places that there are ways of being that spirit can inhabit that are completely different than this. There's no words, there's no images, there's no nothing that could transmit that. There's nothing in this system that could transmit the kinds of things that would be outside the system. But and this is what we eventually get to. We come out as one spirit. We come into this whole thing. We come down and we live it, because that's the only way you can find out what it is. And then once we get down in here and we mingle all down in here, then we start returning back, coming back through all this, it's a joining process rather than that. You keep coming back up to higher and higher levels with larger bodies of single consciousness until you finally come to these planes where there's this single consciousness that's everywhere, and then the decision is made whether or not you remain there, or if you go back outside the system again and return into the original source. This is the image that I have held for a pretty long time. But I guess that's about all I'd say on it. But nobody's from anywhere. And all this, even these different places, are just illusion. There's no all this stuff. I mean, when I say illusion, I mean it doesn't exist. There's no solidness here. There's no table here. It's just space, and it's just movement. It's all based on this movement. It's just we can break it down to our mind gives us solidity. Our mind gives the temperature of things. We're our sensing is all of our sensing devices, but it's not real.
And yet it's important to know where we came from in order to combine with where we are to know where we're going.
Well, we're talking about in a contracted, small amount of time and space. And this is important for us here and now under these conditions for us to do this. That may not be true under different conditions. In polarity consciousness, where our consciousness is broken into threeness, that's necessary. A little bit further down the line, that would not even make any sense. Now here is the next rotation. With the first rotation, we saw this little guy pop out. Now the next one is that you go to the innermost places. So the gold one is the 6 days of Genesis, and these are the innermost places. And so the rotation rotates on those spots and centers there and creates this pattern. So this is the second rotational pattern going around like that. And when you do that, you're now looking at another three-dimensional shape that you can hold in your hand. And it's a really super important one. It's the second shape of Genesis. But if you just, I remember when the angels told me exactly what I just told you, and I was going, really? And I said, what is it? And they just said, look at it. They wouldn't tell me. And I had to sit there. They always do that. They won't. They make me work all the time. And I sat there for 2 days, just, there's a shape in there? Looking at it and looking at it and looking at it. And finally, all of a sudden, it just went, boing, it just popped out at me. Wow. There it is. If you were to erase all the lines in the center one, and erase certain other lines, in fact, you erase all these black lines, and also all the ones in the center, what pops out is this, which is an actual three-dimensional shape that I'll go back there one more time so you can kind of see where they are. And that is a three-dimensional view. I'll draw lines through it in here of a cube with a sphere on each corner. You can't see the eighth one, of course, because that's on the other side. And so this little funny little thing of 8 little spheres comes popping off the page on the second time around. This had a name, according to the ancients also, and they called it the egg of life. I didn't understand that term when they first gave it to me. It took me a while. Now it makes perfect sense, because it is the morphogenic structure of biology. It creates all the living life forms. It creates you, right down to the very shape of your eyes and everything else. It's the structure that forms bodies. And it is also the one that has to do with sound and light. It is interrelated with that, as we will clearly be able to show that organic structure and sound and light are interrelated. And this is the shape that ties them all together. And so for right now, I'm just going to introduce it, that is here, give a name, and put it down. And in a little bit we'll come back and I'll be able to show you what I mean by what this is. There's then another vortex, which you go one more time, you rotate around. This is the third rotation around the central Genesis pattern, or the central sphere, rather, of the Genesis pattern. In this one, there's also another pattern here of 7 spheres. You see this one in the middle, and you see this one here, and this one here, and there's 7 spheres that are just touching each other. These just touch each other all the way around. Does everybody see that? Anybody not see it? Okay. That pattern is real special, but it requires something else in there for it to be clear. It took life a long time to understand this part of it. And when they did, life decided that the pattern that I'm about to show you was so sacred that they hid it. In almost all of the, it's never shown. And I don't even know where it ever is shown, except for here. It usually isn't shown. The flower of life up here, this is the outer limits of the flower of life. What they do right now all over the world is they encircle this with 2 circles, complete it to this image. So if you notice, there's 7 circles in this one that just fit around there. Does everybody see that? Does everybody not see it? Except in this one, they completed a whole lot, all the pattern all the way through it. And then they put this on the walls all over the world. In fact, it's all over the universe, not just here. Why did they stop right here and not go on? Why did they, in all over the world, there's these 19 circles, and because this could be an infinite pattern. What was it about this thing that they were trying to hide? Well, the reason they put it right here and stopped at this place was because of this sacred form that I'm talking about that they didn't want you to see, but they wanted you to know it was there. And so this was the secret. And the secret is, to get to the sacred form is you complete the circles. You see how there's a piece of one here, and here's another bigger piece, and here's there's 3 little tiny pieces of circles. You put your compass so that one would go around like that. There's another piece of a circle completed. Complete all the circles that are shown on this pattern. And look to see what the next vortex is. The very, very next vortex. Here's the flower of life image. There's the 7 circles just touching, and this is the limit. Here in pencil, you'll see all those circles that were completed. All these lines were completed. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? The next rotational pattern is the innermost points, which are there, 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 and there. And so I drew the circles on there. And so if you just complete the circles of here, make the very next rotation, and what you get is this pattern of 13 circles. It looks like this. So if you extract that out, you get this. And it's another one of those so what kind of things, you know. I mean, it's so simple. Who cares, you know? What difference does it make? Well, I mean, to the ancients, this was like blinding light, almost. There was so much knowledge there that it was just hard to imagine that one form could hold so much knowledge. It was given the name the fruit of life. Remember that we had the flower and the seed and the tree, and I never talked about the fruit. The fruit is what the whole tree kind of is for, right? To create the fruit in a way. And it's the part that gives nourishment. It's the part that is the completion, the reason for everything. Well, hidden in this image, there are 13 systems of knowledge that delineate very carefully all the fine points of the entire reality. It really, real good. In every little tiny detail, all the details. And I'm only going to show you 4 of the systems, though there are 9 more. But by the time I get done with 4 of them, I think you'll be able to see the point. And all it is, this is all female energy on the page here. There are 13 ways that male energy can be superimposed over this. Each one of them produces this vast, huge, massive library of information. And so I'm going to begin by showing the first system, the simplest one, the easiest one, and the one that I screwed up on, I just realized recently. I didn't see something. This is going to be kind of funny, you guys, in a minute. But the simplest one is just simply to connect the centers. Like this center could be connected by 3 lines. Connect them all. This one over here, it takes 7 lines, and this one out here, I think it's 10. No, this one takes 10, and this one takes 7 to connect to all the other ones. But this is what I mean. So that you connect this center to that one, and this center to that one, and this center to this one, etc., all the way through here. So you connect them all together. And this is called, throughout the universe, Metatron's cube. It's one of the initial steps of creation. The whole image, the whole thing is called Metatron's cube. This is one of the first things that I received from the angels, and I did it wrong, and they never told me. And for 20-something years, I just found out about 2 weeks ago, something I've been looking for 20-something years. I was looking for something, and I couldn't figure out why. And I just got the answer. I'm so happy.